There is no denying that there is an extensive list of variables that can affect your part's quality, your part's tolerances, and your 3D printer's ability to be repeatable. Some of those things are quality of components on the 3D printer, making sure that your machine is tuned and dialed in, as well as making sure that you have a really good slicer profile. And now, those three things are very important, but another element of it is your 3D printer's filament. If you're not using quality filament that's been manufactured to spec, and if it's been opened, making sure that you are baking out all of the moisture, well, then it's not going to get you very far having those other three things checked off. Now, prior to moving closer to the coast, much of my filament was just left open. Once I opened up a spool of filament, it would then go on a shelf or rack, and to be honest with you, most of my stuff is still now stored in this organizer over here while I'm trying to figure out what's going to be the best long-term solution for me. And although I'm not having a whole lot of issues with moisture on the more basic materials like PLA, there is a lot of filament over here that's been open for many months or years at this point that has a lot of dust and different debris or particles that have settled on the outside that I really don't want getting into my printer or my printer's hot end. Being that I know I'm not the only one that stores their filament out in the open like this, I wanted to take today to show you a really simple thing that you can do to make sure that the only thing coming off of your spool and into your extruder and hot end is the intended material that you're going to be printing with. So with that being said, and without further ado, let's get right into today's video. Massive thanks to Thangs for sponsoring today's video. With over 2 million indexed models in their database and growing regularly, Thangs finds the exact model that you're looking for. Thangs has some pretty unique features, like the ability to perform a geometric search or their recently added AR mode that I love. I'm a very visual person, and having the ability to place a 3D model in your space before actually printing it for reference can be quite useful. Also, it's a lot of fun and can make for some great photos. There are also great collaboration functionality baked right in, like the ability to create a private team for working on projects, where you can keep track of things like different model versions as well as revisions. You also have the ability to follow a user's project, which is great for any that are actively being updated. Thangs has been developing new features for their site constantly, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this platform continue to expand. Links will be in the description so that you can find out more and check out Thangs for yourself. Starting off, whenever I grab an old spool of filament off of my shelf that I'm going to be printing with, I do my best to do a quick wipe down. And normally for that, I just grab a cloth that I have and wipe down the outside of the filament as much as possible. And that definitely helps to get rid of a lot of the dust and, again, like for me, dog hair that's settled around. But there is still going to be a lot of things that are in between the strands of filament that you just can't get to, or maybe on the edges of the filament where the filament meets the spool that you're just not going to be able to get out with wiping it all down. And that's where something like a filament cleaner comes in handy. Now, this is by no means a new concept, and I remember back in 2014 when I first got into 3D printing, they were around then and they were talked about a lot more back then. And because I do not see them talked about nearly as much anymore, and with how many new people have gotten into 3D printing over the last few years and, do all the time, I figured it was something cool to go over and show you so that way you can add it to your list of accessories in your 3D printing kit, or at least make sure it's something that you know about. The way the cleaners work is really simple. The filament passes through the cleaner, which has some sort of a cloth or sponge inside of it, and then exits that before entering in your 3D printer's extruder and inside of your hot end. There are quite a few models already available, but I did go ahead and design my own, which I will link you guys down into the description because there were a couple of features I wanted in mine, as well as I am just trying to do a bit more CAD design because there are some projects that I want to do, and it's a skill that I really want to sharpen to use for projects, and then again also show you guys some of that stuff down the road. So the main thing is a lot of the designs that I saw make it where it's not so easy to replace the cleaning material, or in my case the sponge on the inside of the filament cleaner, and so I made mine where it is threaded, and so you can thread one of the pieces off, put the sponge material inside, close it up, and that should make it both easier to install but much easier to remove in case it gets really dirty and you just want to place that sponge medium on the inside of there. As far as the material goes, I just went with a sponge for my design, and I just went over to the local dollar store and picked up a sponge. There's quite a few different types of sponges that exist. I went with the more dense foam-like, but realistically, any sponge that you could get should do the trick. Once you've cut off a bit of the sponge and you've put it inside of the cleaner, you'll want to go ahead and close it up. And then I recommend taking some filament, cutting it at like a 45-degree angle or a sharp angle, and using that to push it inside of the cleaner and out the other end. Once you've done it once, it will create a little bit of a pathway and it'll be much easier to load filament after that. If you are planning on using this for something like TPU, you'll definitely want to use a more rigid material, at least initially, to again create that pathway. And for the sake of TPU, it might actually be easier to open it up, feed it through, and then
then close it, and then once you've got it fed through, it'll be a piece of cake. Although all my printers use 1.75 millimeter filament, I didn't want to leave out anybody that's got a printer that takes the 2.85 millimeter, so I made two versions, one for 1.75, one for 2.85. They're the exact same model, just the 2.85 has a larger entrance and exit hole to the filament cleaner. I have a very old roll of SainSmart TPU that I purchased back in 2016 that I still haven't fully used, and it was a very dirty spool, and I used it in the filament cleaner, and the results were pretty gross. It caught a lot of dirt off of it, and I am really glad that that did not make its way into the 3D printer. And as far as the actual sponge or the medium you go with on the inside, the frequency of needing to change it out is really going to depend. If you just end up printing out one of these and just using it for all of your filament, even if it's pretty new filament, you won't really have to change it very often. However, if like me, you've got some just really, really old spools, I might end up printing out a few of them and just leaving them on some of these older spools, so that way I know when I use these older spools to use the filament cleaner to make sure I don't get any of that crap that's built up on there inside of the printer itself. For those of you that watch this video, then do a bit more research on filament cleaners, or for those that know a bit about them and had questions, I did want to address the idea of oiling or priming the filament. And for those of you that don't have any idea what I'm talking about, that's totally fine. Basically, there are some people that recommend or claim that adding a little bit of oil to the filament cleaner, that sponge, can really help, especially in some Bowden setups, to help with basically adding a bit of lubrication to the Bowden/PTFE tube, which will help with things like retraction. I've even seen some articles online or discussions where people were saying it helps to prime the hot end or nozzle area. And in my research, I found a couple of videos from Stefan over on CNC Kitchen, which I will link you guys to down below, where he had the initial thought that this would actually be negative for the interlayer adhesion. He did a bit of testing with this, and the results did prove that the parts were not as strong. Then based off some feedback he got, he went ahead and revisited this using a little bit less oil, and I think he used vegetable oil on his second test. And the results ended up being different, where the parts were at least as strong, if not in some cases a bit stronger, and they also had a bit of sheen to them from the oil. With all that being said, I do not have any plans to add any oil to my filament cleaners because I've been really happy with the quality I've been getting on my printers, and the primary goal or purpose I have for it is just to keep that dust and debris out of the printer. And I'm not going to go ahead and recommend oiling these cleaners or adding a bit of oil to the cleaners just because the results that I've seen have been mixed, and I personally haven't done it, and I don't like recommending things that I haven't done or tried out myself. That being said, if there is anybody out there that does experiment with it or has experimented with it in the past and wants to provide some feedback based off your experience, let us know in the comments down below, because I'm sure that others would like to hear it, and I definitely would like to hear others' firsthand experience with using a bit of oil to prime the filament. On that note, that has been filament cleaners. Again, links will be down below to the particular models that I created, as well as the step files in case you want to do any modifications to them. A super simple print that is definitely something handy, even if you don't need it all the time. Just having one available for the time that you do get a spool that's just got a bit of dirt on it that you want to make sure stays out of your printer, it is a really, really valuable thing to have. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great videos. We make a video every single week, so there's always fresh content coming your way. And if you do want to support the channel furthermore, I'll place links down below in the description over to my Patreon, where there are some really awesome rewards. Huge thank you to all of my existing Patreon supporters. I appreciate each and every one of you allowing me to come back every single week and spend more time doing what I love, which is making content for you guys to enjoy. On that note, this has been Daniel from ModBot, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace, guys.